Hello everyone. Good morning. I'm just Kelly Salakot. We will be the reporters reporting the policies on agrarian reform, Philippine taxation, and the land ownership under the rule of the colonizers. So first, let me tackle about the policies of agrarian reform. So, policies on agrarian reform. The agrarian reform policies in the Philippines have long aimed to address the unfair distribution of land that began during the Spanish colonial period. The system heavily favored the elite and foreign landowners, leaving Filipino farmers landless and poor. Even after independence, various governments attempted land reform, but these efforts were often slow, incomplete, or manipulated by those in power. So, agrarian reform policies in the Philippines focus on redistributing land to farmers and ensuring they have fair access to the land they cultivate. These policies were meant to address the long-standing problem of unequal land ownership, which has caused poverty and social unrest in rural areas. The aim of agrarian reform is not only to give farmers land, but also to improve their lives by providing protection, fair distribution, and economic opportunities. However, even with these policies, the implementation has been challenging throughout history, and land reform has faced obstacles such as resistance from large landowners, political interference, and slow government action. Despite these challenges, agrarian reform remains an important tool in the fight against rural poverty. So now we're going to talk about the land ownership in the Philippines under Spain. The Spanish colonizers introduced a land ownership system that allowed them to claim vast tracts of land. They distributed land to Spanish officials, religious orders, and a few loyal Filipinos, forming large haciendas. Native Filipinos, meanwhile, were often evicted or denied legal ownership of lands they had cultivated for generations. This unfair land system is considered one of the root causes of rural poverty and social unrest and that persists in the Philippines to this day. So, when Spain colonized the Philippines, they introduced a land system, or also known as the Encomenda system, excuse me, that concentrated land in the hands of a few. The, the Spanish crown claimed ownership of all lands, and large portions were granted to friars, Spanish officials, and loyal local elites. Lands that Filipino communities had cultivated for generations were taken and converted into private estates or haciendas. The majority of Filipino farmers became tenants, and they had to pay rent, often in the form of crops, and had no security of tenure. If they could not pay or were no longer no longer wanted, they could be evicted from the land. This system created deep inequality and left lasting effects in Filipino society. It also became one of the driving forces behind nationalist movements and the push for reform in the later years of the Spanish rule. To sum this all up, agrarian reform policies aim to correct historical injustices in land ownership, which date back to the Spanish colonial period under Spain, and land was concentrated in the hands of a few, leaving most Filipinos landless. Today, the struggle for fair and land distribution continues, making agrarian reform a crucial part of our national development and social justice effort.
So let's proceed to land ownership in the Philippines under the American. Landlessness was the root of social unrest. Yes, because when they took control of the Philippines, alam ng mga Amerikano na ang kawalan ng lupa ang dahilan kung bakit hindi matahimik ang mga Pilipino. That's why nagtayo sila ng Philippine Bill of 1902, also known as the Cooper Act, was a significant piece of legislation enacted by the U.S. Congress that established the structures of the Philippine government. It aimed to transition the Philippines toward self-governance while maintaining American authority. So ang ilahang goal di ay ani was to help Filipinos slowly learn how to govern themselves. But the US still had a control over this. This law gives limitation kung ilan-ilang ektarya ng lupa ang pwedeng ariin. Private individuals may own 16 hectares, while corporate landholders may have 100,024 hectares. Americans were allowed to own land. Kahit mga Amerikano ay pinapayagan nilang magmay-ari ng lupa sa Pilipinas. Act No. 496, Taurine System, also known as the Land Registration Act. It was enacted by the Philippine Commission on November 6, 1902 and established the Court of Land Registration or CLR and the Office of the Registers of Deeds. Then pagkatapos nilang magbigay ng lupa sa mga tao, nagpatupad sila ng sistemang legal para sa titulong pagmamay-ari ng lupa or sa madaling salita, land titles. In 1903, a homestead program, a land reform initiative allowing individuals to acquire up to 16 hectares of public agricultural land for farming. Ang homestead program ang nag-allow sa mga tenant to enter an agricultural business by acquiring a farm of at least 16 hectares. Pero kaninga program, limited na siya sa areas like Northern Luzon or Mindanao. No limit to land size ang mga landholders ng mga dato, isamot ka dato kay sila ra may naay kwarta, so sila ra pod ang makapalit ug makaprocess mga land titles. Land sold to rich Filipinos and Americans. No support for new landowners. Farmers went back to being tenants. Wealthy hacienderos took land from poor farmers. Yes, why? Kaya naghatag tuod sila mga yuta sa mga tenant, pero yuta ra. They didn't even get a support from the government. Bisan lang manuntag mga tools, pero wala. That's why, mapugsan silang ibaligya rapod sa mga rich American and Filipinos kay mangutang ramang gihapon sila. Then, pag kawala na sila ikabayad, ang ilang mga land ang nagiging kapalit. That's why they become tenant again. Sakdalista uprising on 1835, a peasant rebellion in central Luzon that lasted for 2 days. May 2 to 3, 1985, Sakdal means to accuse, helmed by Benigno Ramos. He rallied support from Manila and nearby provinces through the publication which led to the establishment of the Partido Sakdalista in 1933. They demanded reforms from the government such as the abolition of taxes and equal or common ownership of the land among others. Actually, duha ni siya ka-rebellion, Kolorom ug Sakdalista. Pero murag Sakdalista ang nakapukaw sa mga lamok. Joke. Mga American day. Pero wait. Pizza. Matulog bang lamok? So much for that. So, humingi sila na alisin ang buwis at bigyan ng pantay-pantay na pagmamay-ari ng lupa ang mga tao. They also opposed the dominant nationalista parties' acceptance of gradual independence from the United States and instead demanded immediate severance of ties with America. Wala sad sila ni sagot na hinay-hinay na kalayaan mula sa Amerikano. Gusto nilang agad-agad na kalayaan para sa Pilipinas. For a new party with a small clout, they did well in the 1934 general elections, scoring 3 sets in House of Representatives and several local posts. This encouraged them to attempt an uprising in 1935. Upon being crushed, Ramos fled to Tokyo and the Partido Sakdalista collapsed. So, nanalo sila ng 3 sets sa House of Representatives and sa mga ilang lokal na posisyon. Ito ang nagtulak sa kanila para mag-alsa. Then pagkasakpa nila, nitaka si Ramos padlong Tokyo, then bumagsak ang Partido Sakdalista. In Quezon's social justice program, sa panahon ng Commonwealth government, lalong lumala ang sitwasyon ng mga bukid. Dumami ang pag-aalsa at lalo pang lumayo ang agwat ng may-ari ng lupa at ang mga nangungupahan, kung kaya't naglungsod ng social justice program si President Quezon kung saan binibili ng gobyerno ang mga lupain at hahatiin ito para ibenta sa mga magsasaka. Tinayo rin niya ang NAREC o National Rice and Corn Corporation para tumulong sa mga magsasaka, lalo na sa mga kaso sa korte. Meron din Court of Industrial Relations para ayusin ang hindi pagkakaintindihan ng landlord at tenant. National Land Settlement Administration or NLSA Agrarian Reform failed. Nagpatuloy din ang homestead program sa tulong ng NSLA pero hindi naging matagumpay ang agrarian reform dahil sa kakulangan sa budget at maraming pag-aasa. Nang sumiklab ang World War II, nahinto lahat ng plano para ayusin ang problema sa lupa. Number 2 question, what were the major changes introduced by the American colonial government regarding land ownership and agrarian policy? Examine the Public Land Acts and the Torrens Title System and their effects on small farmers. During American period, malaki ang kanilang binago patungkol sa land ownership and farming. They passed the Public Land Acts, which set rules on how much land people could own. They also introduced the Torrens Title Systems, a new way of registering land ownership. Once registered, the owner received a Torrens title, which served as a strong proof that the land was theirs. This system was meant to protect land ownerships from fake claims and make selling or buying land easier. Pero sa kabila ng lahat ng yun, maraming magsasaka pa rin ang naghirap. Under those policies, the process of applying for land and getting a title was costly and complicated. So ang naka-benefits kaayo ang mga corporation, which is ang mga mayayaman. Some farmers even lost their land because they could not meet their requirements. While these laws were supposed to promote fairness and security in land ownership, they often ended up favoring the rich and keeping land distribution unequal. So sa kabila ng lahat, parang nilaro lang nila, pero sa huli, sila pa rin ang may malaking benepisyong nakukuha.
Good day everyone. Today, I'm going to report Agrarian Reform in the Philippines post-Marcos era. This is Nico Ciprado and welcome to my report. Agrarian Reform in the Philippines post-war to Marcos era. Post-World War II, President Rojas introduced a 70-30 tenant-landlord share and low-interest loans. President Quirino created LASIDECO to support landless farmers, later expanded by President Magsaysay through NARA to provide land aid to settlers. Land ownership in the Philippines under American. Quezon Social Justice Program, National Land Settlement Administration, or NLSA, agrarian reform failed, World War II halted all efforts. So, to begin with, let's dive back to our history. Why did the agrarian reform took place at the very first place? So, agrarian reform in the Philippines happened in the first place because of deep-rooted land inequality, social unrest, and economic inefficiency. Here's a breakdown of the main reasons it became necessary. So first, colonial legacy of land ownership. Spanish colonization 1565 to 1898. It created a feudal land system. Huge tracts of lands were owned by Spanish elites and religious orders while most Filipinos became landless tenants. American period 1898 to 1946. The U.S. government tried to break up large states, but many lands were sold to wealthy Filipinos, not tenants. Land titles were formalized, but small farmers were excluded due to illiteracy or cost. So here are the key players that are involved: Manuel Rojas, Elpidio Quirino, Ramon Magsaysay, Carlos P. Garcia, Diosdado Macapagal, and lastly, Ferdinand Marcos Sr. These are the reforms and laws that are introduced. Republic Act No. 34, 1946. Share tenancy contracts were modified, 70-30 sharing tenant gets 70%. Next is Land Settlement Development Corporation or LASIDECO, and later NARA, encourage the resettlement of two public lands. Next is Agriculture Tenancy Act of 1954, Republic Act of 1199. It means that it regulated landlord-tenant relation. Next is the Land Reform Code of 1963. It was under Macapagal. It literally means abolish share tenancy and establish leasehold system. So, why did we tackle all these things? Because it addressed the landlord-tenant conflicts after the war. It is aimed to protect the tenant farmers from exploitation, began the transition from sharecropping to leasehold and ownership, introduced the idea that land to the tiller is a state goal. So, lastly, in Marcos' era, he declared that only covered rice and corn lands gave tenant farmers the right to own land and tilled. Landowners were paid with land transfer certificates. So guys, agrarian reform in the Philippines was a response to the centuries of land inequality, rural poverty, and social unrest. From the post-war to Marcos era, efforts were made to give land to the tillers, improve farmers' lives, and modernize agriculture. However, limited coverage, weak implementation, and political interest hindered its full success. And that's all.
So, for the agrarian reform efforts under Marcos, President Marcos declared martial law in 1972 to expand executive power and address structural problems in the countryside. Presidential Decree Number 27 or the PD-27, also known as the Code of Agrarian Reform of the Philippines, was the core of agrarian reform during this period. The decree applied to tenant farmers on private agricultural lands primarily used for rice and corn. Marcos declared martial law in 1972 to consolidate his power and to address long-standing issues in the countryside. He argued that the country needed drastic measures and to fix problems with land ownership, and this move gave him a lot of authority to make laws without getting approval from the legislature. So the main law behind Marcos' land reform was the Presidential Decree Number 27 or the PD-27. It was designed to change the landscape of ownership in the Philippines, but it had a very specific focus. The law only applied to tenant farmers who were working on private lands that were primarily used for growing rice and corn. These left out many other farmers who grow crops like coconuts or sugar, which were also major parts of the country's agriculture. So, under this decree, the tenant farmers were supposed to become the new owners of the land they'd work on. The amount of land a farmer could get was based on its irrigation status, 5 hectares if the land was not irrigated, and a smaller of 3 hectares if the land was not irrigated. The idea was to give a farmer a plot of land that was big enough to support their family. Landowners weren't forced to give up all their property. They were allowed to keep a certain amount of land, specifically up to 7 hectares, as long as they were the ones actively farming it. And to determine the price of the land, the government came up with a simple formula. They would look at the average amount of crops harvested from the land in the 3 years leading up to the decree and set the price at 2.5 times that average harvest. And the farmers didn't have to pay for the land all at once. They were given a long time to pay for it, making 15 equal yearly payments with a 6% interest rate. This payment plan was designed to be affordable for the new landowners. And one interesting part of the program was the condition for receiving a land title. A tenant farmer could not get their final land ownership papers until they had become a full member of the government-recognized Farmers Cooperative. This was meant to encourage farmers to work together and support one another with things like getting credit and selling their crops. And to prevent the land from ending up back in the hands of a few wealthy landowners, the decree also put strict rules on how the land could be transferred. It could only be passed down to a family member or transferred back to the government. This was supposed to keep the land in the hands of the farming families. So, for the Operation Land Transfer or the OLT, under the Presidential Decree number 27, a key component of the agrarian reform in the Philippines, and it aims at transferring ownership of rice and corn lands to tenant farmers. It was initiated by the President Ferdinand Marcos in 1972, and sought to emancipate tenants from the bondage of the soil. The program involved the acquisition of private agricultural lands and their subsequent distribution to landless farmers and farm workers. While the Masagana 99 was an agriculture program of then Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos to increase the rice production among Filipino farmers, and the program was launched in 1973 at a time the country was experiencing a rice supply shortage. So, while the program seemed good on paper, it had some serious flaws. Landowners quickly found ways to get around the law. One common tactic was to switch the crops they were growing from rice or corn to something else, like sugarcane or coconuts, which weren't covered by the decree. Another trick was to fire their tenant and hire wage laborers instead. Since the law only applied to tenants, this loophole allowed landowners to avoid having to give up their lands. This evasive action had a negative impact. Instead of solving the problem of landlessness, this loophole sometimes made it worse, leaving many poor farmers without land and without a job. To make matters even worse, the program was also hurt by corruption. Marcos and his close associates often used the program for their benefit, and many of the funds and resources that were supposed to help the farmers were instead stolen. The widespread corruption significantly weakened the program's ability to achieve its goal, leaving many farmers to struggle on their own.
So after Marcos' fall at 1987 Constitution, agrarian reform became a priority under President Corazon Aquino. So, matapos may pabagsak si Marcos at nang ipasa ang 1987 Constitution, naging prioridad ng Administrasyong Aquino ang reformang agraryo, partikular ang pagbabahagi ng lupa. Kapansin-pansin ito dahil pag-aari ng pamilyang Aquino ang Hacienda Luisita. On July 22, 1987, Aquino issued Proclamation 121 and Executive Order 229 to initiate reform policies. So, ang mga dokumentong ito ang nagsilbing pundasyon para sa pagtutupad ng mga pulisya at programa na naglalayong ipamahagi ang lupa sa mga magsasaka.
Good day, everyone. Today we will share with you the evolution of Philippine taxation during the Spanish colonial period. Taxation helps governments raise revenue for governance and public service. In the Philippines, taxation evolved during Spanish colonization. Early taxation systems were reshaped and made more complex under Spanish rule. Taxation is a way for governments to raise money. In the Spanish era, taxes were used to pay for colonial expenses like salaries, churches, public buildings. But instead of helping Filipinos, the system mostly served the Spanish and their local allies. Its purpose is to fund the colonial government, and its role is to control the population and maintain Spanish rule. Pre-Spanish taxation practices. Filipinos had a subsistence economy. Forms of tribute: buwis, handog. Tributes were mainly voluntary or service-based, not formal taxes. Before the Spaniards arrived, Filipinos didn't pay formal taxes. They lived simply and gave small tributes like rice, fish, or help in farming to their leaders called datus. Its purpose is to respect or support, not forced payment. And its role is voluntary gifts or community contributions. This system was based on kinship and shared survival, not money or government power. Next is imposition of tributo or tribute. Spaniards required Filipinos to pay tribute to fund colonial administration and clergy. Introduced reduction to gather Filipinos into pueblos. Encomenderos managed tribute collection, exemptions, principales, soldiers, officials, and vagrants. When the Spaniards took over, they introduced the tributo. Every Filipino family had to pay this to support the colony. To collect taxes easier, Spaniards grouped people into pueblos and assigned land to them. Some Filipinos became encomenderos, tax collectors rewarded by Spain. Its purpose is to finance government, pay clergy, and soldiers. And its role is forced payment, start of formal colonial taxation. Tributo was paid in cash or produced like rice or chicken. Next is economic impact. Shift from subsistence to surplus agriculture. Tribute paid partly in cash, partly in produce. Helped fund Spanish conquest and control. Because of tributo, farmers had to produce more than what they need. This changes their way of life from simple living to working harder to meet Spanish demands. Its purpose is to increase production for tax collection, and its role is to shift Filipinos from self-sufficient to tax-driven economy. Half of the tribute was paid in cash, half in crops, and this helped Spain sustain its colonies. Next is Manila-Acapulco galleon trade. The galleon trade started in the late 1850s. Spanish ships carried goods between Manila and Mexico once a year. It made the Philippines part of a global trade. So its purpose is to connect Asia to New Spain, Mexico, and Europe. Its role is to keep Spanish presence strong and economy alive. So tax collection remained weak, so Spain sent money called Situadoril from Mexico until 1820. So this is the map of galleon trade. So as you can see, you see the Manila, and here is the Mexico. Next is cedula personal in 1884. Replaced tribute with poll tax cedula, paid per person based on income, increased government income, burdened peasants easier on wealthy. Chinese paid higher discriminatory cedulas. So in 1884, tributo was replaced with cedula personal. Each person had to pay based on income. You had to carry this ID to travel. Chinese residents had to pay more. This was discriminatory. So its purpose is to replace tributo with more individual income-based system, and its role is to organize tax records and raise more revenue. Peasants still found this heavy. Elites found it easy.
Good morning, Mom. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to report the direct and indirect taxes. Then, there are two major direct taxes were added in 1878, where are Urbana and Industria. Which is Urbana is tax on urban rental value, or tax on house rental values. And then Industria is tax on salaries, dividends, profits, or tax on salaries and profits. Then, the indirect taxes is customs duties on export and imports. Then, no excise taxes imposed, which is indirect taxes like customs duties were added on goods entering and leaving the country. The purpose of these are how is get more money from business. Then, state monopolized or government income from stamp paper, liquor, cockpits, opium, or tobacco monopoly in 1781 to 1882, forced farmers to grow tobacco, then made the colony self-sufficient and profitable. Or Spain also made money from monopolies like liquor, cockfighting, and especially tobacco in 1781. Filipinos in some areas were forced to grow the tobacco, which the government brought at low prices. The purpose of the government is to increase government profit, and the role is control economy and protect production. So, next is forced labor or polo a servicio, where males required 40 days of labor yearly or reduced to 15 in 1884. Then could avoid via falas payment or 3 pesos, or prone to corruption. Work used for defense, shipbuilding, public infrastructure, and called up prestation personnel by late 1880s. So, all Filipinos, all Filipino males were forced to work 40 days a year, reduced to 15 in 1884. If they wanted to escape labor, they had to pay 3 pesos, called fala. Or sadly, the money was often stolen by local officials. The purpose or oh, their purpose is to provide free labor for public works and military use, and their rule is build roads, ships, and churches. Next is inequality and corruption. Principales or elite locals help Spaniards control population. Then corrupt practices, pocketing, tributus, and falas. Then heavy tax, burden, and peasants. Then system increased inequality. So Spanish elites relied on principales or local leaders to control tax collection. These leaders abused power by stealing tributes and exempting themselves from taxes. Their purpose is use local to enforce colonial policies, and their role maintain control through bribery and favoritism. Next is primary source of Mariano Herbosa's letter in 1886. Complaints about tax abuse and inconsistency, no official receipts or clear rules, increased land taxes even with poor harvest. Low-cost infestation worsened poverty, government support was minimal and corrupt. So, Rizal's brother-in-law Mariano Herbosa wrote about unfair taxes. He said taxes raised even when harvests were poor. Rules weren't clear and receipts didn't show how much was paid. The purpose is the real voice showing Filipino struggles, and the role reveal abuse, confusion, and corruption. And then inclusion, Spanish taxation reshaped Filipino economy and society, introduced formal, centralized tax systems, created inequality, and fueled resentment, sparked reforms and resistance leading to Filipino nationalism. Or Spanish taxation helped the government but hurt the Filipino people. It was unequal, corrupt, and caused a lot of suffering. This system led to anger and resistance, and it became one of the reasons for the Philippines Revolution. Then, thank you for listening. We hope this helps you understand how taxation during Spanish rule shaping our country's.
So, related question based on our report is how was the Philippine taxation system evolved from the Spanish colonial period to the present democratic government? So, analyze how different periods shape the purpose and structure of taxation. So, the answer to the question is the Philippine taxation system has evolved greatly from the Spanish colonial period to the present democratic government. During the Spanish rule, taxes were mainly imposed to fund the colonial administration and benefits paying. Filipinos were forced to pay tributes, give labor, and produce goods like tobacco for state monopolies. Tax collection was often unfair, corrupt, and burdensome, especially for peasants. Over time, systems like the cedula personal and direct taxes like urbana and industrial were introduced, but inequality remained. Today, under the democratic government, taxation is based on income, consumption, and property, guided by the Constitution. Its purpose is to support national development, provide public services, and promote social justice. Unlike before, tax laws now aim to be more transparent and fair, with institutions like BIR, Bureau of International Revenue, responsible for proper collection. Each historical period, from colonial oppression to independence, helped shape a system that gradually shifted from control and abuse to one intended for nation building. Thank you for listening. We hope this helps you understand how taxation during Spanish rule shaped our country history.
So, good morning, Mom. So, the next topic is all about taxation under the Americans. When the Americans took control of the Philippines, they reformed the taxation system to make it more efficient, organized, and capable of funding the new government. The Philippine Commission, led by William Howard Taft, studied and recommended changes to the tax system. Taxation under the Americans have key changes included. So, number one is abolition of tribute. The Spanish era tribute and forced labor system were replaced. So, under Spanish rule, Filipinos were required to pay tribute, a form of tax that also came with forced labor. The Americans arrived, they abolished the system because it was unfair and outdated. They wanted a more modern and just tax system. So next is land taxation. A land taxation was introduced in 1901. To raise government funds, all property owners had to pay a tax based on the value of their land. So land taxation was created by the American government in 1901. It means that every landowner had to pay tax based on the value of their land. This was a major sources of income for the government. So the next is cedula or residence tax. Every person aged 18 and above had to pay a residence certificate tax. So cedula is a certificate of residence. Every Filipino 18 years old and above had to pay this annually. It served as a form of identification and proof of tax income. People like us also need a cedula for getting jobs and or signing contracts. So this is the questions that refers to the topic under the Americans.
So what were the major changes introduced by the American colonial government regarding land ownership and agrarian policy?
Go.
No, no, what?
Next topic.
So this is the questions that refers to my topic about the taxation under the Americans. So what were the major changes introduced by the American colonial government regarding land ownership and agrarian policy? So this is my answer. The American colonial government introduced land taxes alongside the public land acts and terrains title system. These taxes forced small farmers to pay fees to retain their land titles. Many could not afford the taxes, resulting in the loss of their lands to wealthy individuals or corporations. This policy increased land concentration and deepened agrarian inequality in the Philippines.
Taxation during the Commonwealth period, tax reforms and legislation. 1936. Income tax rates increased. Surtax introduced on individual incomes over 10,000 pesos. 1937. Abolition of the satellite tax, a progressive move. 1940. Introduction of a residence tax on all citizens aged 18 plus and corporations. In 1936, the government raised income tax rates and added a surtax. Specifically, they target individuals who earned 10,000 over 10,000 pesos. They aimed to pay the wealthier citizens more tax. In 1937, the cedula tax was abolished. So, removing the cedula tax considered as a progressive move to reduce the burden the poor people or citizens facing. It was a progressive step because it reduces the burden the lower class is having. On 1940, they make the new tax which required all citizens aged 18 and above and corporations to pay residence tax, broadening the tax base but also adding a fixed burden tax. A fixed tax burden. 1939 National Internal Revenue Code K changes. First, replace normal 3% tax and surtax with a single progressive income tax. Second, reduced personal exemptions. Third, slight increase in corporate income tax, new taxes on inherited estates and gifts. Fourth, replaced cumulative sales tax with a 10% turnover tax on luxury goods. Fifth, increased taxes on liquors, cigarettes, forestry products, and mining. Sixth, dividends became taxable. The government revised the tax system by replacing multiple taxes with a single progressive income tax. This means tax rates increased with income levels intended to be fairer. So the first one nasa revenue code is multiple taxes or the normal tax and surtax. They changed it into a single progressive income tax, which means increase ang tax rates if ang income sa person mataas pod. Next is the second is personal exemptions were reduced. Meaning this means the taxpayers could deduct less from their income before taxes. So potentially this increased the tax revenue. The third is corporate taxes were increased slightly and new taxes were imposed on inherited estates and gifts, which targeted wealth transfers. Next is the replacement of sales tax with a 10% turnover tax on luxuries, focused taxation on non-essential goods. the fifth one is increased taxes on items like liquors and cigarettes targeted products with high consumption rates or social cost. So, there is a ka-fifth, increase nila ang mga product nga dako og kanang consumption sa mga people, so like liquors and cigarettes. And lastly, making dividends taxable meant that income from investments became a source of tax revenue. Evaluation of the tax system. Improvements over earlier American system but still inequitable. Lower class bore most tax burden. Upper class, landed elite, and politicians benefited from tax loopholes. Agriculture taxed lightly to promote growth. Lack of incentives for industrial investments. Taxation did not diversify or direct economic development effectively. Although the system improved from previous American era taxes, inequities persisted. The lower class continued to bear the heaviest burden because many taxes indirectly affected everyday goods and services they consumed. The upper class, including landowners and politicians, often avoided heavy taxation through loopholes or influence. Agriculture was lightly taxed to stimulate growth in this sector, but this meant less government revenue from a major part of the economy. Lack of tax incentives for industry meant industrialization was not encouraged, limiting economic diversification. Overall, taxation was not used strategically to develop new sectors or balance economic growth. Impact of World War II and Japanese occupation. Economic activity halted. Japanese military administration took over. Continued Commonwealth tax system but exempted Japanese military goods. Foreign trade declined sharply. Tax revenues mainly from amusements, manufacturing, professions, and business licenses. Government raised funds via national sweepstakes and government bonds. Increased military expenditures led to issuance of military notes to finance the war. When Japan occupied the Philippines, economic activities largely stopped due to war conditions. The Japanese continued the Commonwealth tax system but exempted their military goods, reducing tax revenue sources. With foreign trade collapsing, tax income shifted to domestic sources like amusements, manufacturing, and business licenses. The government also raised funds through lotteries and government bonds to cope with expenses. Military spending increased rapidly, prompting the Japanese administration to issue military currency to finance war costs, which often leads to inflation.
So yun nga, matapos ang World War II ay lubhang nasalanta ang Maynila, ang Pilipinas. Wasak ang Maynila at ang pangunahing agrikultura na pangunahing kabuhayan ng mga Pilipino ay sobrang nahirapan din or nasalanta din. So the US, despite granting independence, exerted considerable influence. So kahit na nasa malaya na ang Pilipinas, ay umaasa pa rin ito sa US. And proposals for direct taxation were rejected to avoid political contempt. So, at this time, tumanggi si Rojas na makipag-kaalyado sa ibang bansa dahil baka magalit ang mga kaalyado niya sa Kongreso. So, ito ang nangyari sa post-war challenges in 1946 to 1949. So, next is Quirino's economic growth, which is 1949 to 1953. So, President Elpidio Quirino implemented export exchange controls to stimulate the domestic manufacturing, import substitution, industrialization, New taxes measures, including higher corporate taxes, doubled tax revenue between 1948 and 1953. So at this time, Elpidio Quirino's administration initiated import and exchange controls as a key element of substitution imports industrialization. So yun nga. This policy aimed to reduce reliance or imports by promoting domestic productions, by limiting imports and controlling currency exchange rates, and government fostered growth of local industries. Simultaneously, new tax measures, including higher corporate tax, were implemented. These measures significantly increased government revenue, doubling it between 1948 to 1953. So this domesticate the potential for strategic fiscal and policies to generate revenue and promote economic growth even in the post-war times. So Quirino economic growth was a big impact in these years. So because even if in the crisis, even in the crisis or situation, he gave a more important ano pagdumala or here his So, as I said, Quirino's economic growth in 1949 to 1953 has an economic impact on these years because Pangulong Quirino is one nga nagkontrol sa mga import at palitan ng pera para suportahan ang mga lokal na industriya. So, or import substitution. So, dagdag buwis sa malaking kumpanya at ipinatupad at doble ang kita ng gobyerno mula 1948 to 1953. Ipakita nitong pag-asa ang ekonomiya kahit sa panahon ng kahirapan. So, in these years, this is the advocate of Quirino's economic growth. The implemented export exchange and control to stimulate domestic manufacturing or import substitution in the industrialization. So the next is the regressive policies and corruption in 1953 to 1968. So subsequent administration failed to significantly reform the tax system. The system remained regressive, favoring the wealthy elite. So in this time, there are biases happening. So corruption and poor tax collection persisted. Congress resisted meaningful tax legislation. So pagkatapos ni Quirino ay nanatiling hindi patas ang sistema ng buwis. Mas mabigat ang buwis sa mahihirap, habang ang nakakaiwas ang mayamang negosyante at politiko. Laganap ang korupsyon, ang Kongreso ay hindi nagpasa ng batas para ayusin ang buwis. In this case, Congress heavily influenced by vested interests, consistently resistant legislation that would have reformed the tax system and broadened the tax base. This period exemplifies the challenges of implementing equitable and effective tax policies in the face of political and effective tax policies in the Philippines, in the face of political resistance and widespread corruption. So, yun nga ang sistema noon sa Pilipinas, ang pagiging bias, habang yung mahirap ay lalong humihirap at yung mayaman ay lalong humayaman. Pati sa tax ay ganun din ang nangyayari. Then, after that, Marcos era, which is 1968 to 1985. So, under Marcos, the tax system remained largely unchanged. Indirect tax dominated and 70% of total collection. So, low tax effort, 10.7% in 1985, reflected inefficiency and inequity. So, yun nga, under Ferdinand Marcos' authoritarian rule, the regressive tax system persisted. Indirect tax, such as sales tax and excise tax, constituted, cons- constituted a significant portion. So 70% of total tax revenue. This placed a heavier burden on lower income groups who spend a large proportion of their income on goods subject to these taxes. This low tax efforts 10.7% in 1985, which is the ratio of the tax revenue to gross domestic product, indicates significant inefficiency and inequity in the tax system. So the low tax effort signals that government was not maximizing its potential revenue collection, hindering its ability to fund the crucial public service. So, yun nga, ang mga buwis ay galing sa indirect tax na mababa ang tax efforts, which is 10.7% noong 1985. Then, ibig sabihin, kulang ang kinukolektang buwis para sa pangangailangan ng bansa. So, kulang na kulang talaga ang pagkolekta nila ng tax para iahon ang Pilipinas at that time. So, at that time that is the time of Marcos era. So, kulang pa din. Wala pa rin pinagbago sa unang nangyari. So the next is Aquino's 1986 tax reform program, which is 1986 which is in year of 1986 to 1992. So the Aquino administration introduced sweeping tax reform after the People Power Revolution. So key changes include the introduction of value-added tax or VAT or VAT with a uniform rate of 10% except for exports. This simplified the tax systems and replaced numerous existing tax. Lower rates applied to businesses with low annual sales. A tax-created method was adopted. Basic commodities were exempted. Luxury goods faced higher taxes. So, at this time, mukhang naiangat-angat na ng kaunti ang mga tax, which is pagkatapos ng People Power Revolution ay pinatupad ni Pangulong Aquino ang VAT na which is 10% sa mga produkto at serbisyo at 0% sa export. So, pinaikli ang sistema ng buwis at pinalakas ang BIR para maiwasan ang korupsyon. So, tumalon ang tax export mula 10.7% sa 1985 hanggang 15.4% in 1992. So, na maraming pinagbago sa panahon ni Aquino kumpara sa dati. Meron din siyang maraming na ibigay na tulong in this time. So, that's it. Next that's it, the Aquino's 1986 tax reform program. So, next was, yun nga, this slide is this is the Aquino's major reform in tax system introduced under his term was the introduction of the value-added tax or VAT with the following features. So this is the features he do. So first is the uniform rate of 10% sale of domestic and import goods and services and 0% on exports for foreign currency denominated sales. So next is the 10% in lieu of varied rates applicable to fixed taxes, 60 nominal rates, advanced sales tax, tax on original sale, subsequent sales tax, compensating tax, milers tax, constructors tax, brokers tax, film lessors and distributors tax, excise tax on and matches and excise tax on processed videotapes. So, grabe talaga ang pinagbago ng Pilipinas ng panahon ni Aquino dahil sa mga tax na ginawa niya. And then the next is 2% tax on the titles with annual or receipts or less than 5,200,000. Grabe, ang laki. Next is the adoption of tax credit method of calculating tax by subtracting tax on inputs from tax on gross sales. So, adoption tax from credit method of calculating tax. So, subtract the tax on inputs from tax on gross sales. And then exemption of the sale of basic commodities such as agriculture and marine food products in their original state, price regulated petroleum products and fertilizers, and many more. Then additional 20% tax on non-essential articles such jewelry, perfumes, toilets, waters, and other vessels for pleasures and sports. The VAT or VAT law was signed in 1986 and effect in 1988. While it was a reliable source of revenue for the government, new would reduce its reliability in legislative exemption groups. So, in these six features that Aquinos did, so this gives a big impact into the Philippines from taxes. So, and overall, ang pagreforma ni Aquino ay nagpasimula ng mas maayong sistema ng buwis at paglago ng ekonomiya. Pero hindi pa rin tuluyang nawala ang korupsyon at tax evasion. Sadly but true, until now, corruption didn't solve it. But still, people did not surrender to fight for corruptions. So that's all. And the next topic will be the next presidential terms included of other year of 1990 extended. So next topic will introduce of Brillo. Thank you.
Good morning, ma'am. This report is the continue of Alcorin's report, the administration of Fidel Ramos. So, in 1992 to 1998, comprehensive tax reform program in 1997. Goals is broad-based, simplified tax system, reduce loopholes, incentivize compliance, and VAT expansion RA 7716, extended VAT to service, exemption, cooperatives, educational service, CHED, accredited low-cost housing, books, and newspaper. First, during President Ramos' time in 1992 to 1998, the government had enough money at first because they sold assets and got foreign investment. But when the Asian financial crisis happened in 1997, it became harder to keep it became harder to keep the budget balanced. So Ramos made the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program, or CTRP. This program made tax system fairer and covered more services with VAT so that government could collect more money to use for projects. So the next administration is Gloria Macapagal Arroyo in 2001 to 2010. Expanded VAT or EVAT law RA 9337 2005. VAT base widened to energy product, coal, petroleum, and electricity. VAT rate increased from 10% to 12% 2006, resulted in revenue gains but essentially widened deficits due to spending hikes. So under President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, she added the expanded VAT or EVAT, which increased the VAT rate to 12% in 2006. This was needed because the government was spending more money, so they needed more taxes to avoid too much debt. The next administration is Benigno Aquino III in 2010 to 2016. Sin Tax Reform RA 10351 2013. Motivation: fiscal stability, public health, social equity. Raise excise taxes on alcohol and tobacco. Impacts: health budget tripled 2015. PhilHealth coverage for the poor surged 55.2 million to 515.4 million beneficiaries, contributed to investment grade credit rating the Philippines. So during President Aquino III term 2010 to 2016, he made the sin tax reform. She didn't make new taxes, but increased taxes on alcohol and tobacco and cigarettes. This helped the government earn more money and also made people think twice about buying unhealthy products. The money collected was used for health services like hospital and PhilHealth. So, halimbawa ng sin tax law is dahil sa sin tax law mas mahal na ang UC at alak kaya mas kaunti ang bumibili. Yung tax na nakokolekta na pupunta sa PhilHealth kaya mas maraming mahihirap ang libre ng health insurance. The next administration is Rodrigo Roa Duterte in 2016 to 2022. Proposed tax reform: lower income taxes, reduced high rates, second highest in Asia, to ease burden on worker. Adjust VAT exemption and raise excise taxes on fuel and automobiles. Goal: boost economic growth and ensure equitable benefit across all social classes. So, nung si President Rodrigo Duterte na yung naging presidente, pinangako niya ang tax reform lalo na sa income tax kasi mataas ang income tax sa Pilipinas kumpara sa ibang bansa. Sa Southeast Asia. Ang plano, bawasan ang income tax para sa workers, bawasan ang VAT exemption para mas marami ang taxable at taasan ang excise tax sa gasolina at kotse. Layunin nito na lahat pati mga mahihirap maramdaman ang magandang epekto ng economic growth.